This lesson will be a supplement to the work of Rebecca Sachs on mentalizing and the right temporoparietal junction. She's going to use transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, to interfere with processing in this brain region, and she'll find that she can influence people's moral judgments about a particular scenario. And the scenario is Grace and her friend are at a chemical factory. They're taking a tour, and her friend wants some coffee, so Grace goes to make some coffee. Now, she finds a canister that is labeled sugar, and so she thinks it's sugar and puts sugar in the coffee, and sure enough, her friend is fine. So we'll call that the fine condition. The powder really is sugar, and Grace thinks it's sugar. And if we ask, is Grace to be blamed for anything? Well, there was nothing wrong happened, and she had good intentions, so people give low blame on a scale from none to very much. In the attempted harm condition, the powder is sugar, but Grace thinks it's poison. So the canister is labeled poison. Grace thinks she's putting poison in the coffee, but it really turns out to be sugar. So the friend is okay, but Grace's intention here was a bad intention. And people say that Grace deserves a lot of blame in the failed attempt condition. Of course, there's another condition here, not shown in the middle here, but that's the accident condition. Here, it would be the reverse of this situation. The powder is poison, but Grace thinks it is sugar. And for the accident condition, most people consider the fact that Grace did not mean to do this. She thought it was sugar, so they're going to give her low blame. Even though the friend died, right? She drank the poison. Grace didn't mean to do that. Grace believed that the powder was sugar. Now, there is some variation, however, in the accident condition, and what Sachs found was a correlation between rTPJ activity and the extent of blame that people would give in the accident condition. And that correlation looks like this. So here we have rTPJ response from low to high, and we have blame, none to very much. In the accident condition, most people wanted to assign very low blame. However, there was some variation. And what Sachs found was this difference in blame was correlated to rTPJ response. So let's just focus on the ones that had high response in TPJ. Well, if we think about what TPJ is doing, it's representing Grace's beliefs, right? So for those people who were thinking about Grace's belief that the powder was sugar, they were assigning Grace lower blame than those individuals that had less activity in that mentalizing region. So we can sort of think of these folks here for this part of the line. These folks here had less activity in rTPJ, as though they were thinking less about Grace's belief that the powder was sugar, and perhaps focusing in a sense more on the outcome, which was bad, so they assigned more blame. So Sachs found this correlation between TPJ response and the amount of blame that was assigned to Grace. Now, Sachs went on then to do a TMS study where they would place the TMS device over the rTPJ, and when you turn on the TMS device, it sends a magnetic pulse that temporarily sort of interferes with the processing of that brain region. And what they found was, you can see the red bars are the bars that we saw before, the amount of blame without TMS. But when she applied TMS, when people were making moral judgments, she could influence. In this case, in the attempted case, the failed attempt case, TMS caused a reduction in blame, whereas in the accident case, TMS caused an increase in blame. And so we'll see if we can figure out, using our brains and pictures of brains, why that might be the case. We'll take the accident condition first. In the accident condition, we know that Grace had the belief that the powder was sugar, but in reality it was poison, so the outcome was bad. Her friend died. Now, people generally assign low blame here because they take into account Grace's belief that the powder was sugar. And to model that on our brains here, we're going to have two systems here. The amygdala is going to be tracking the outcome. The fact that somebody died here, we're going to say that the amygdala is sensitive to that emotional event here, and so it's going to be signaling that harm was done. And we can think of that as sort of tilting the judgment towards the blame end of the spectrum. However, the TPJ is going to be processing Grace's belief, and the belief was sugar. And that belief is consistent with an innocent intention. She did not mean to harm her friend. So this signal from TPJ is going to tend to override the signal from the amygdala here, and that would help us understand why people would give low blame in the accident condition. Now, this is a normal brain with no interference from TMS. When you apply TMS, that little wand that sends a magnetic pulse, it temporarily interferes with processing here. And if you're going to interfere with processing, then the signal from the TPJ will be degraded or weaker. But if this signal is weaker, it means that the amygdala's signal will have relatively more influence on the judgment. And remember, in the accident condition, this is the pathway that is overriding the amygdala's signal to produce low blame. But if you interfere with TPJ, you're going to get a weaker signal here. So it won't be able to counteract the amygdala's signal as much, and so you'll get more blame. It's as though that TMS is going to interfere with the subject's ability to process the fact that Grace had an innocent belief that the powder was sugar. And as a result, TMS produces more blame in the accident condition. In the failed attempt condition, recall that Grace had the belief that it was poison, but it turned out it really was sugar. So the outcome was okay. There was no harm done, but she had a bad intention here. She believed it was poison. Right? So in a normal brain, the idea is the amygdala is not signaling any harm because the outcome was neutral. It was really sugar, right? However, the TPJ is processing Grace's belief that it was poison. So that signal there is going to be driving the moral judgment for high blame. When you apply TMS, again, you're going to interfere with processing in this region. So this TPJ signal will be weaker, and so it will have relatively less influence on the moral judgment. And if you reduce that signal, which was the one driving the high blame, then you're going to get less blame. In other words, you're giving more weight, in a sense, to the amygdala signal, which was signaling no harm. So Sachs was demonstrating that the right temporoparietal junction is involved in making moral judgments. And that makes sense because, after all, to make a moral judgment, we have to consider not only the outcome, but also the intentions of individuals. And in this case, the rTPJ processing the belief that Grace had that it was poison here, that suggests that her intention was negative in the failed attempt case. Whereas in the accident case, the rTPJ would be processing the belief that the powder was sugar, and so that would be a factor leading towards an intention that is a neutral intention or a good intention. But the fact that TMS can alter moral judgments suggests that the TPJ really is contributing to judgments here. By interfering, we are seeing an effect on the extent of blame that people assign to Grace.